Hello, I'm Paulina Rivera, and welcome to my comparative biology presentation. In my presentation, I will be comparing and contrasting the digestive systems of each of these three organisms, and the organisms I will be comparing today are earthworms, flatworms, and sponges. Each one of these organisms have extremely different digestive systems, and some are definitely more complex than others, but they're definitely unique in their own way, and at the end of the day, they aid the organism in receiving and absorbing nutrients. So right here, we have pictures of each organisms. On the top right, you will see an earthworm. You've probably seen one. They're pretty common. And then under that, we have a flatworm. And then right here, we have a sponge. Okay, so before we get into the digestive systems of each, I'm going to briefly explain each organism and kind of what they are and hopefully obtain a better understanding of the presentation. So first we have an earthworm, and earthworms belong to the phylum Annelida. The phylum is derived from the word annelus, which means small ring. Annelids get their name from their segmented body, as you can see in this picture. Those little rings around the worm are segmentations that divide the body cavity. Annelids are triploblastic, which means they have 3 germ layers, the additional layer being the mesoderm, which helps form muscles and organs between the digestive tract and the outer covering. When it comes to movement, an earthworm moves using structures called setae, which helps the worm anchor themselves when moving through soil. Each setae projects through the body wall, allowing them to anchor segments of their body and contract their circular and longitudinal muscles, allowing them to move forward. Annelids are also coelomates, meaning they have the mesoderm completely surrounding the cavity and suspending internal organs. This is also referred to as a true body cavity. And lastly, there are about 15,000 species of annelids, which include the earthworm, obviously. And also on your bottom left, there is a ragworm. And on the right, there is a leech, and in these two you can also see the segmentations. And those just examples of a couple of other organisms in the phyla. Next we have the flatworm. You also hear them to be referred to as Planarians. Flatworms belong to the phyla Platyhelminthes. Like earthworms, flatworms are triploblastic, meaning they have that 3rd layer of mesoderm. Earthworms are what you call acoelomates, meaning they have mesodermal cells completely filling the blastocele, and the gut cavity is the only cavity, so in reality they don't really have a real body cavity, unlike the coeloms, and you can see that in the bottom left picture. When it comes to their appearance, flatworms are very aptly named because they are very flat, but their flatness actually helps in increasing their surface area, which helps with O2 diffusion. And you can look at these pictures. On the top right, you have a tapeworm, which is a kind of planarian and can actually be very detrimental to our health. And on the bottom right, there is a flatworm, and you can really see the flatness of their body and how they extend. Okay, so lastly, we have the sponge. Sponges belong to the phyla Porifera, which actually means pore bearer. Sponges are referred to as pore bearers because they are completely covered in these tiny pores called ostia, the little holes that you can see. And unlike nearly all other animals, sponges lack tissues and organ systems, which might be a little confusing since we are talking about a digestive system, but I promise you it'll make sense. But since sponges lack tissues, everything is done at a cellular level, and the 2 main types of cells in a sponge are choanocytes and amoebocytes. Choanocytes are used for feeding, and amoebocytes can actually turn into other special cells. And when it comes to structure, sponges have 2 structural components, one called spongin, which is a kind of collagen, and spicules, which is made up of silica or calcium carbonate and prevents sponges from being eaten. And both of these actually provide structure and make it so that the sponge doesn't move or break. And right here on the right, you can see the 2 pictures of the sponges, and you can really see the tiny holes that completely cover the organism, and those are the ostia or the pores. So now we start with the actual digestive systems of the organisms, and right here we have the digestive system of an earthworm. Earthworms have what you call a complete digestive system, meaning they have 2 openings, a mouth on the anterior side and an anus at the posterior. As for the digestive tract itself, food is sucked into their mouths using a very muscular pharynx, and then it is pulled through the esophagus to the crop to the crop, a structure where food is stored. And since earthworms don't have a jaw or teeth like we do, they have a gizzard instead. A gizzard performs the function of grinding up its food, so it's basically like chewing its food. After getting grinded up in the gizzard, the nutrients pass through the typhlosul, which is an important part of the earthworm's digestive system since it increases the surface area of the worm and making it so that food is more efficiently absorbed and the worm is getting the necessary nutrients. The food then goes through the intestine, and any undigested leftover organic matter leaves the worm through the rectum and through the anus, which is the second opening in the organism. And to follow along with the diagram right here, you have the mouth, the pharynx, which pulls the food in. It goes through the esophagus to the crop, and then passes the gizzard all the way down to the typhlosul. And then afterwards, it goes into the intestines and out of the anus right here. And moving on, we have the digestive system of a flatworm. So unlike the earthworm, a flatworm has an incomplete digestive system. This means that it only has one opening, making it so that food comes in through the mouth, but waste is also expelled back up through the mouth. So it's all just one opening. And as for the tract, flatworms also have a pharynx, which helps in sucking the food. It then goes into the mouth and then into the gastrovascular cavity. And a gastrovascular cavity is a structure found in some animals, and it is responsible for both the digestion of food and the transport of nutrients throughout the body. And since the food is then expelled through the mouth, it is often referred to as a two-way digestive tract. And with the diagrams, you can see a flatworm is a bit odd in the sense that the mouth and anus isn't where you think it would be, like up here with the eyes. So it actually looks like it's on the organism's stomach. But it gets pulled into the pharynx right here and then into the gastrovascular cavity where it is absorbed and transported and then back out through the same opening. And lastly, we have the digestive system of a sponge, which is the most different out of the three, and it's a bit more unusual. To start, you can see right here that sponges actually don't have a digestive system. They are what you call filter feeders, meaning they use this kind of filtration mechanism to strain small organisms or food particles from its surroundings. And as stated in the previous slide when describing the sponge, it is mentioned that choanocytes help we had a little bit of some technical difficulty, so sorry about that. But what I was saying, sponges use flagellated choanocytes. It's the main type of cell, and they are collar-like rings that help trap food particles around the base of its flagellum. And sponges engulf bacteria and other food particles by phagocytosis. And with this whole process, water is absolutely essential, since sponges obtain food by filtering or straining food particles that are brought in to the organism from the water in which it lives, and they achieve digestion through something called intracellular digestion, which is when food particles are digested inside specialized cells, in this case being the flagellated choanocytes. And to make the whole feeding system even weirder, sponges don't even have a mouth. Instead, they use their tiny pores, or ostia, to absorb the water which carries in the nutrients. And right here you have the pictures showing the top one. You can really see the water being brought in, and on the bottom you see the flagellum, which is where the food particles is collected at, and the collar-like structure we talked about earlier. And then the food particles move on to being phagocytosed, and as for the waste, it is actually brought back out into the environment through the water that comes back in later. So moving on to the comparing and contrasting, although they don't have too many similarities, at the end of the day, they all have the same function. They bring in nutrients and keep the organisms alive, basically. But right here, you see the Platyhelminthes and the Porifera. They both absorb nutrients using special cells. Sponges use the choanocytes, and some flatworms have mesenchymal cells, which absorbs nutrients, meaning flatworms can actually perform extracellular digestion and intracellular digestion. It just depends on the species. And another comparison would be how the Platyhelminthes and the Annelidas both utilize pharynx to suck in the food into their mouths. And now on to the more contrasting. I think the most obvious one would be how sponges don't have a digestive system altogether like the other two do. And as some flatworms and sponges absorb nutrients with cells, earthworms use the typhosol to absorb its nutrients. And lastly, Platyhelminthes and annelids contrast each other in the sense that earthworms have a complete digestive system, meaning they have the two openings, a mouth and an anus, and while flatworms have an incomplete digestive system, which is just the one opening acting as both the mouth and the anus of the animal. And you can see the typhosol right here, and then you have the earthworm and then the flatworm. And here you have my citations, and thank you for watching my presentation. Hopefully it all made sense, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and sorry for the little technical difficulty in the middle. Okay, thank you. Bye.